All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the stream, or welcome if you're new. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. And thank you if you're somebody who can't catch the stream live, but you're watching it after the fact. Certainly much appreciated. We have some pretty, I would say, these topics are interesting. I mean, I don't know that I would ever say there are uninteresting topics, but it's more about going over what is expected to happen once the PS5 Pro launches. Um, we have a new report here that talks about the PlayStation 5 Pro, which we have talked about relatively extensively here. And I think at this point, it's safe to say we're going to get a PS5 Pro. I think that there maybe are a few people out there that are still not convinced it's happening. And to be fair, anything could happen, anything could change. We still have quite a bit of time before it apparently releases. But we're getting some analysis, I guess you could say, as to what a PlayStation 5 Pro and GTA 6 combo could not only do for PlayStation as, for their business, but also for the entire video game industry, which is certainly something worth talking about. Another topic of discussion today is going to be about the PlayStation 5 entering the latter half of its life cycle. Okay, this is something that Sony recently announced, and it unfortunately seemed to create some negativity and a little bit of frustration even with some players. And I think it is mostly due to two things. I think number one, people are misquoting or either that or misunderstanding what's being said here. And number two, I think people are forgetting about previous console life cycles, the history specifically with PlayStation of the previous console life cycles. And I want to talk about that extensively. Other topics that we're going to be going over, we're talking about some PlayStation Plus extra and premium games. We're talking, and this is something we have to acknowledge, we're talking about how Sony apparently they lost like $10 billion in investment. They had a pretty significant hit to their stock. This came after the earnings report. I've been seeing an unbelievable amount of fear mongering about this, and it just goes to show that you got to be really careful where you're getting your information from or who you're choosing to listen to, because if there's something that has been made very clear, or I guess maybe not clear enough, is that a lot of people don't know what they're talking about. A lot of people don't understand what they're actually reading and what's actually being reported on. And, the term nothing burger kind of comes to mind, but maybe it is a little bit more extensive than that. Maybe calling it a nothing burger is a little bit much there. So we're going to go over that. We're also going to be talking a little bit more later on about Helldivers 2, a couple of updates about this game, and the CEO and the director of the game kind of talking about what's happening right now. And if we have time for it, we're going to be talking a little bit about Stellar Blade, a little bit about Twisted Metal, and a little bit about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or actually the third game that's going to come after Rebirth. So guys, once again, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we dive into any of these topics, first I want to give a big shout out to Jake Skew27 dropping a membership gift. Jake, thank you so much, man. I've definitely been noticing you've been kicking off the membership train every stream basically by dropping that membership gift. So thank you for that, buddy. And we also have Josh here with a super chat. And he says it's hilarious that every time there is a detrimental news for Xbox, gaming media has to stir up some type of negative news for PlayStation and make it sound dire. I'll touch on that in just a moment, Josh. But before I do, I want to give a big shout out to Corey, the Legend Landiga, coming in early today. He wants to see this membership train get off to a good start. He drops 5 memberships right off the bat for you guys. So, Corey, my friend, thank you so much, man. You keep earning that platinum trophy, and seriously, if it wasn't for that level of support, man, I simply wouldn't be able to continue doing what I do here. So, salute to you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And as I say that, we have another legend, Hellbound 1981, makes himself known again. Follows up Corey's 5-bomb with a 5-bomb of his own. He drops 5 more membership gifts onto you guys. So just like that, between Hellbound, Corey, and Jake Skew, we are at 11 members, and we have Mini Tom Official getting in on it here. You guys want to get this membership train started nice and early. Can't blame you. The members lounges have been pretty fun lately. So Mini Tom Official drops a membership gift as well, bringing us up to 12 on the day. Mini Tom Official, thank you so much for that, buddy.
Thank you.
That's for all of you guys. Good stuff. I'm going to update that. I'm going to read these super chats, but you know what? Before I go any further, I do just want to let you guys know a couple of ways you can support me. I'm sure you're already seeing this, but we do get new viewers here. And just to inform everybody, obviously watching the content helps tremendously, right? Without that viewership, there would be no content. The second thing you can do that's super easy and super simple is hit that like button. Okay, hitting the like button not only lets me know that you enjoy the content, but it also helps spread the content around, kind of, getting in front of new faces, bringing new community members in. So if you could do me a favor, please hit that like button. And there are 3 ways you can support me directly. The first is by becoming a channel member. You not only get a membership badge, of course, but you gain access to some exclusive membership perks. One of those perks is the Members Lounge. We do a Members Lounge not after every single stream, but the overwhelming majority of them, we do a Members Lounge after, and it's a good time. They have a very different energy than the regular streams that we do here. They're pretty fun. So, they can get kind of crazy too. So consider becoming a channel member. If you're already a channel member, please consider gifting channel memberships, as we already see some people doing. We have an incredibly generous community here. They are very supportive of one another. They're very supportive of me as a content creator. And so if you want to contribute to that, by all means, please consider doing so. And last but certainly not least, please consider donating a super chat. Ask a question, give an opinion, make a statement, anything in between. It all helps tremendously. So a big thank you to everybody who supports the channel. Now, Josh, getting back to what you're saying here, you're basically saying that every time there's some type of detrimental Xbox news, gaming media has to stir up some type of negative news for PlayStation to make it sound dire. It's quite unfortunate, because if there's something that I've learned covering video games and kind of covering the gaming industry and being a part of it, right? Being directly a part of the news cycle, I've learned that this is just the way it goes. And I highly doubt it's exclusive to just the gaming industry. This is unfortunately how these things work, where people tend to be attracted to negative news, right? They tend to veer in the direction of negativity. And, when you talk about websites or, video content creators or whatever it might be, if there's something that is universally understood, is that negative headlines, negative news, or concerning news, even more so, anything that could be concerning or instill fear or make people feel like I have to know, right? That is the stuff that dominates and that produces the clicks. And it seems to me that if you look at Microsoft and Sony, right, they are operating, well, first off, they're operating very differently in a few different ways. But one of the main ways they're operating almost polar opposite, and believe me, I've been following this closely enough to know, is marketing and PR and communication. Okay, on Sony's side, it's not that they don't market their products or their brand. They do, but they do it in a very focused and specific way, and it's pretty clear cut. I mean, we saw with games like God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 that Sony did not really ramp up the marketing for these games until about 6 weeks out from it launching. To whereas in the past, and what other publishers tend to do at times, is kind of market their games all year round. So you take that, and then you also take the fact that when it comes to how they communicate with the fan base and the general gamers, the more broad, gaming landscape, Sony has absolutely been, I guess you could say, playing it close to the chest, where they're not out here really focused on taglines that much anymore. They're not trying to push anything that aggressively. They just seem to be honestly okay, for better or for worse. And I think that's where people kind of get very opinionated about it. Just telling people the truth. And I don't mean to make it sound like anything you're hearing that leans into better communication or marketing is necessarily a lie. But I guess I have to emphasize the word truth, as in, like, they just kind of give it to you straight and say, this is what it is. And you see the way people react on the internet, and Sony's just like, well, honestly, Sony isn't even looking in that direction. Sony's already moved on. They don't care. And sometimes that can be negative, but I think at this point in time, given what we're seeing in the video game industry right now, what we are seeing in the video game industry is a lot of turbulence. A lot of turbulence. Things are not looking good. I think this type of marketing and PR that Sony has opted in for is actually going to be beneficial for them during this time, because make no mistake, all of these video game companies are in survival mode. Regardless of how much money they have or how much the companies are worth, they are focused on minimizing their losses. Now, when you compare that to, say, Microsoft, you look at the way Microsoft markets, it's the polar opposite. Microsoft is all about trying to communicate directly with the fans, and what we saw happen with the recent rumors and leaks with Microsoft, some people were kind of pointing out that it seems like it's kind of shining a light on the negative side of this, where there's like some kind of parasocial relationships being developed. And it just kind of, I think, once again emphasizes just how important Microsoft feels it is to market their products, and whether it be, Game Pass, the Xbox console, their games in general, they just have a completely different energy around it. And I do think it does make it easier for not only the fan base, but just the general gamer to kind of, when you're talking about it online and when you're engaging with it, it just makes it easier to just kind of get behind it. To whereas when Sony is out here just straight up telling you, like, this is it, and that's the way it is, please enjoy or please buy, it's like, you can see why some people are just like, that's it, So not to make it sound like Sony hasn't done anything, because they certainly have. They just had a great state of play where they communicated with us a lot, and they revealed a lot. But I think you guys generally understand what I'm saying. And so the greater point that I'm trying to make here, Josh, is that the media is well aware of this. Okay, the media is very much aware of the difference in how Sony and Microsoft conduct themselves, and they lean into it because, frankly, Sony and Microsoft make it easy for the media and journalists and anybody who's covering the news to do so. It's just the way it goes. There actually, was a time during the PS4 and Xbox One generation where it was completely flipped, right? Sony and Microsoft together made it so easy for everybody to, get behind Sony and the PS4 and the PlayStation brand. And Microsoft also made it very easy for people to be against the Xbox brand or what they were doing, and make it seem like, what Sony is doing is better. And again, the media, the wider gaming audience, and the journalists, they all knew this, and they leaned into it because that's what produces the clicks. It's just kind of follow whatever's popular at the time, and whatever is, whatever is going to generate you more traffic, essentially, is what we are seeing. So this is why I think now more than ever, it's very important. And I'll be honest, like, I'm guilty of not abiding by this, certainly not as much as I should. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm holier than thou or innocent by any means. But I do hope to improve upon this going forward, where I just want to talk directly to my audience and to anybody who wants to listen in, and just kind of cut through the nonsense and the BS. I've made the mistake many times over of acknowledging the nonsense and the BS way too much, and all it really serves to do is get in the way and create distortion around the actual, like the reality, I guess you could say, of what's going on. So sorry, that was a very long-winded answer, Josh, but you continue here with another $10 super chat. So thank you for that, buddy, saying, it's also funny how Xbox going third-party all of a sudden means that PlayStation should release Helldivers 2 on Xbox. They should have just took two massive publishers, or they just took two massive publishers from PlayStation and an immense cut from PlayStation Call of Duty sales. PlayStation is not trying to play nice. Yes, and so Josh, basically what you are revealing here is just, again, you're what you're doing is just shining a light on the reality of big business and competition, right? And the again, it leans into the marketing. Let me ask you, who was saying that Helldivers 2 should be on Xbox prior to the rumors that occurred with Xbox 2 weeks ago, and then after the comments Phil Spencer made after the Xbox business update? I think it's safe to say that 99% of people were not even thinking about that, right? We went from just acknowledging the fact that, wow, Sony's doing something different here by releasing Helldivers 2 day and date on PC. This is new for Sony. This is a big step for them. Let's see how it goes. And so, of course, because of everything that happened with Microsoft, it kind of brought out, or I don't say it brought out, but it made it, I guess, that much easier for people to say, okay, well, you took one step, so why not just go the distance, right? Why not just bring it to Xbox? And to me, that is not taking into account many different factors, right? It's no different, to be honest, than, and this is where, again, I'm somewhat guilty of this. It's no different than jumping to the conclusion that, well, Microsoft is now going to go full third party, which I am guilty of assuming that's what would happen, and saying that, oh, every single one of their games going forward is going to release on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch. When in assuming that, it just completely jumps over so many other factors that are absolutely worth taking into consideration, because if you don't take those factors into consideration, you're going to lack the fundamental understanding of why that's very likely not going to happen. And if it is going to happen, you're going to lack the understanding of why it's going to happen much later on and not right away. And the exact same thing applies to Sony here, where, again, people see, oh, Helldivers 2 releasing day one on PC, it's doing well on PC, so clearly Sony's going to go third party and they're going to release games on Xbox. When the truth is, there's zero indication whatsoever that Sony's going to do that. Sony would have to go, completely make their way over significant hurdles internally as a business, right? They would have to go over those hurdles, and it just doesn't happen like that overnight. I think what we're seeing with Microsoft should confirm to people that even the idea of a publisher or a platform holder, right, saying we're going to publish some of our games on the competing platform, on the competing console, Microsoft themselves, who has the most to gain here, seemingly, even they're taking it slow. Even they're making it known that we're not just going to dive in head first. And to be honest, Microsoft usually is the one to dive in head first. But even with this, they're like, we're going to take it slow. We're going to wait and see. So if you look at a situation like this, if you've been following Microsoft and Sony and how they handle these things, it seems a little bit silly to me that anybody would jump to the conclusion that, well, if Microsoft's taking it slow, then that means Sony's going to dive in head first. When in reality, Sony has not dove in head first with any of this stuff. Sony's been slow. They've been taking it one slow step at a time. I don't think that's going to change. But Josh, I do understand where your frustration comes from. I think it's safe to say that the frustration most likely it comes from a certain corner of the internet, where if there's something I truly have learned at this point, and it's dangerous. Trust me, man, this stuff is dangerous, because it's not, again, it's not exclusive to just the gaming industry. It's all over, regarding all different topics, right? Some of the most important topics out there. There are corners of the internet where people just get together and they decide that, you know what, we don't have to live in reality. We don't have to be part of that. We can just say what we want. We can make things up. And if we have enough people and our group is big enough, and we just kind of high five each other and say, yeah, that absolutely, bro. There you go. Perfect. Speak that truth, right? If there's enough people doing that, they start to live in a bubble. And the concern isn't that they're doing that, because that has always existed and that will continue to exist. The real concern is how many people are buying into that. That's the concern. So, and Josh, let me finish this out here because I just saw that you have two other chats. You're saying Microsoft said in court for PlayStation to, quote, just make their own Call of Duty, end quote. And the second Helldivers 2 drops, Phil doesn't understand who it helps in the industry by it not being on Xbox. You say it helps PlayStation, Phil. Here's competition, bud. Yeah, and to be honest, if I had to guess, I think Phil regrets his answer to a small extent anyway, because Phil probably knew as soon as those words left his mouth what was going to happen, how people were going to interpret it. And it's understandable, because it's like, yes, most people are interpreting it the correct way, and that you just basically said you're a hypocrite. You know what I mean? And it's okay. Like, listen, everybody's a hypocrite at times. I'm not here to slander Phil or anything. I don't care that much. It's just one comment about one game. But it came at a time, like you're saying, when it's easy for people to kind of forget the things that occurred in the last year and a half or so, the things that were said. And I'm not saying people should walk around, just make sure you keep in mind what was said almost a year ago, but it's just sometimes it is important to bring these things up to remind people. Like, hey, Microsoft, they were pushing for competition, supposedly, right? That's what they want. And now that the Activision Blizzard deal is done, it seems like, well, actually, maybe competition when it's convenient. It's not surprising. Again, it's a multi-trillion-dollar corporation. Sony would do the same thing. Truth be told, Sony would be doing the same thing if the tables were turned, because this is how corporate entities operate. They're not always going to be 100% truthful, because it simply does not work in their favor to be 100% truthful. I think one of Phil's biggest problems, it's kind of the opposite of Sony's, in that Phil, I think, talks too much for his position, right? Like, he's the head of Microsoft Gaming. Every time he does an interview, every time he gives these answers, he's taking a risk that you might just put your foot in your mouth. And sometimes he does. But it seems that the general public is okay with that. To be honest, like, people still really like Phil Spencer. People still are kind of, okay with the way Microsoft handles their marketing and PR, and they're behind it. So they just, I guess, view it as a necessary risk. The pros outweigh the cons here. Sony, I think, views it the other way. I mean, Jim Ryan, it seemed like every time he talked, almost every time, people were jumping all over him. And I have to imagine that at some point in time, Sony's marketing team was like, Jim, let's just sit this one out. Let's just, do we really have to say anything right now? Do we have to say anything? And if the answer is no, then let's just not say anything. It's fascinating when you think about it, how these different companies operate. So thank you for the super chats, Josh. We have Ice Rezo saying, MBG, it typically costs $500,000 per month for 100,000 users for servers. It's the reason Nintendo and Sony shy away from the live service games. And then you say Phil's comments was for the FTC. Exactly. Yes. Not us. It was for the FTC. But getting back to your first super chat here, you're talking about server costs. Well, you know what? This will allow me to cover a topic that I have for you guys today. It's not really something I want to talk too extensively about, but I want to relay this information to you because I've been seeing a lot of people getting very frustrated, very fed up, seemingly, with the server issues that Helldivers 2 is still experiencing. So this is being reported from WCCF Tech. They say Helldivers 2 has been plagued by server issues since its launch, and it seems like these issues cannot be solved by simply purchasing more servers. Speaking on X, Arrowhead CEO and game director Johan, although I think it's pronounced Johan, I think I've been saying it wrong, Pilstead, commented on the game's server issues, saying that they cannot be solved by just buying more servers. It is a matter of labor, and the developer needs to optimize the back-end code since they are hitting some real limitations. making these Helldiver 2 server issues worse are players who are essentially squatting in the servers while not actively playing the game so as not to lose their spot, which is causing the login queue to be excruciatingly long. The team, however, is now aware of this matter and is likely to take some action. Server issues are really damaging Helldivers 2 right now, as it is preventing the vast majority of players from actually experiencing the wacky situations they can find themselves in while playing. And so this is a perfect time for me to bring this up, Ice Rezo, since you're mentioning that, the cost of servers. It makes sense for, I think, people, including myself, who are not really familiar with how this works, to just assume, well, if the servers are the limiting factor here, then just get more, right? Just buy more servers. But, we're getting some insight without going into too much detail from the developer themselves, saying it actually has a little bit to do with our code. It has to do with, labor and and manpower. It's not that simple. And to me, that makes sense. And I'm glad he said this, because it kind of seems obvious at this point, right, that it's not that simple. If it was that simple, Sony and Arrowhead would have absolutely just paid whatever was needed to, ensure that players could, just get in the game and enjoy it properly. But the reality is that, yes, this is beginning to damage the game. I'm seeing people on my channel or, on my Twitter account basically saying that they bought the game and they are getting fed up with just having to sit there and wait to play, or like every time they are playing, they get kicked out or something. And to be honest, I've had a mixed experience as well. I'm like level 21 right now. And so I've definitely been able to play enough to get a lot of enjoyment out of it and make a lot of progression. But I've also had my fair share of disconnects, specifically at night when I'm trying to play. I have to just kind of sit there, right, for sometimes up to a half hour, 45 minutes. And it can be very annoying, where it's like I start to think maybe I should just walk away, and find something else to do because I'm just sitting here. There's also a couple of issues with the game. Like, I don't know if you guys have experienced this problem, but it is like the worst one I've experienced, because it forces you to completely reboot the game. And again, you have to re-log into the servers. Is for some reason, like, the game just starts to break down when you're playing it, where it's like, oh, I just lost 10 frames. Oh, I just lost 20 frames. Now the game is running at literally like 2 frames a second. Oh, now the game is practically frozen. And it's so weird. I don't know what causes that. I don't know what's doing it. It's some kind of bug, and they still haven't fixed it. But that has happened to me like at least 4 to 5 times. And the reason why that in particular is so annoying is because the only way to fix it is I have to close the game out and re-log in. And sometimes that doesn't work because I have to sit, Actually, you're saying it took me over an hour to get in last night, but at least when I got in, I got to play with MBG. Yeah, by the way, man, I meant to say, like, goodbye, but I couldn't because the game crashed. At the end of the round, the game just crashed, and I was like, okay, well, I think that's enough for tonight. But yeah, we got some good rounds in, dude. That's a memory leak. Okay. Yeah, I think somebody told me that. That sucks. But, it's worth pointing these things out because the truth is, for Helldivers 2, it's not perfect, right? There are some serious issues, and these issues are persisting. That is, I think, becoming the problem. I think a lot of people are willing to be very patient, very understanding. It's clear that they're experiencing more success than they had anticipated. But as each day passes where these issues persist, people's patience is going to begin to wear thin. People are going to start to get frustrated at the fact I paid for this game. I would really like to play it, And hopefully, look, man, I would like to see this game go the distance. Absolutely. I don't want to see it just I don't want to look back a couple months from now and think, man, who knows where Helldivers 2 could have been if they just could have sorted out the server issues, I hope that's not what we're saying a couple months from now. I hope that in just a few days from now, we're saying, oh, they finally got it sorted out. Good stuff. But I also want to say that Helldivers CEO is being unusually honest. You wouldn't expect him to be saying something like this, but I have another report here from Insider Gaming, and it says Helldivers 2 was released on PlayStation 5 and PC on February 8th, promptly taking the gaming world by storm. It's a no-holds-barred, all-out action-fueled romp that features intense multiplayer mechanics that people have fallen in love with. Unfortunately, Arrowhead Game Studios, the developer behind Helldivers 2, didn't anticipate the hype, and since the moment the game was released, it has suffered from network stability and connection issues. As players join the queues, AFK durations are capped, and Arrowhead does everything possible to increase server capacity. This is what the CEO has stressed, that people shouldn't, since then, the CEO of Arrowhead has stressed that people should not spend their money on the game until the servers can support the capacity. In a post on Twitter, this is what he said, quote, "If you have no cash, get it later. While we made a really fun game, it's worth waiting until the servers can support the capacity. I mean, as a CEO, I of course want the game to be as profitable as possible, but if you spend your last dollar and get stuck in server queues, I'd be heartbroken." And so, I just wanted to point this out because I feel like he definitely didn't have to say that, and it kind of goes against what you would expect a CEO of a company to say. And I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the candidness of what he's saying, where he's like, look, don't buy the game until we can guarantee you can play it. Because I'm sure him, as well as the entire development team, are reading the frustrating replies, and I'm sure they're getting a certain amount of flack for as much understanding as they're getting. They're probably seeing some not so great stuff as well. And so, I think it's just a really cool thing for them to kind of say, where it's like, look, we know we have a great game and we want you to play it, but we don't want you to spend your last dollar on it. Just kind of keeping in mind that, there are people out there that probably could use that $40 for something a little bit more important given the economy right now. So cool stuff there. Just wanted to acknowledge that. So Ice, thank you for the super chat, bud. We also have Alex Mercer, the prototype, with a $5 super chat saying, I'll most likely get the PS5 Pro just for GTA 6 alone due to the overheating on the base PS5 that happened to me while playing Spider-Man 2 twice. That's really interesting to me that you're saying that because, there was multiple times so far throughout the PS5's life cycle concern about it like overheating or having some issues and, the liquid metal. And there's I don't know, I haven't really been seeing anybody claiming that they're having this issue, but every now and again, I do see somebody kind of, just randomly say, oh yeah, like my PS5 is having an issue. I think I told somebody a couple streams ago, they did mention that they were having this issue to kind of turn on your PS5 and turn it completely upside down vertically. And it should help kind of, because he said he had a dry spot with the liquid metal. And so there are these cases where this happens. And yeah, I mean, I will say this, Alex Mercer, that's not the ideal reason to upgrade to a PS5 Pro, but hey man, I'm sure Sony's going to be thrilled about that. I'm sure Sony's going to be thrilled about the idea of oh, well, your regular PS5 isn't working, so we got this PS5 Pro sitting right here for you. It's been 4 years. Why don't you upgrade? I'm sure Sony will be very happy about that, Alex Mercer. But yeah, GTA, if your console's overheating from Spider-Man 2, even if it's just 2 times, I mean, yeah, I would be a little bit worried about what GTA 6 might do to that console, bro. I would definitely be a little bit worried. Luckily, I've never had my PS5 overheat, as far as I'm aware. I'm pretty sure when the PS5 overheats, it gives you a pop-up, it gives you a notification, and then it just automatically shuts down. I don't think I've ever had that happen. All right, guys, so once again, I'm going to ask you to please hit that like button for me. We have almost 500 people here joining us, which is great to see. Really appreciate it if you hit that like button. We're going to move on to the next topic, and I want to talk about the situation with Sony's finances, and I need to cover this because we need to clear up a couple of things. All right? something I have noticed, and this kind of speaks to Josh's super chats here, is people are running with this headline. Sony lost $10 billion, reportedly lost $10 billion. And it's actually quite strange because I've been seeing people kind of use this as like a way to troll people, which is weird because it's like, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over the facts here, and then we're going to explain why people who are like focused on this, because that's the unfortunate thing that's going on right now is some people are hyper focused on this because I don't know why. To be honest, I don't know why. I guess it really does just kind of reveal that there's some people who really want to run with anything they can. But I'm going to read this article from WCCF Tech. The title says, PlayStation's decade-low profit margins worry analysts amid runaway game budgets. Sony's most recent earnings report wasn't a great one for the previously strong-seeming PlayStation brand. As we reported, Sony downgraded their fiscal year 2024, which runs from the beginning of April 2023 to the end of March 2024 target for PS5 sales from 25 million units to 21 million units. They also admitted that no major AAA franchise entries will be published over the course of this coming fiscal year. Needless to say, this wasn't received that well, partly leading to a plunge in Sony stock that subtracted an estimated $10 billion from the Japanese company's value. That said, a number of financial analysts are actually more concerned about another figure from Sony's most recent earnings, its operating profit margins. A company's operating margin basically measures what percentages of every dollar they spend is made back in profit. And for this past big holiday quarter, Sony's margins were only at 6%. By comparison, the margin was 9% for the same quarter a year ago and around 12 to 13% prior to 2022. Jefferies analyst Atul Goyal found this declining operating margin particularly puzzling, as in his opinion, quote, various tailwinds that should have driven up the margins towards 20%, end quote. These tailwinds include the increasing prevalence of digital games, which Sony reaps all the profit from without having to kick back anything to retailers, record live service spending, and revenue from the new multi-tier PlayStation Plus. Per Canton Games analyst Serkan Toto, manufacturing costs have also come down as a result of their redesigned PS5 model released in 2023, so that's not eating into profits. So what's the issue here? The most likely culprit is the ballooning game development cost, as we've reported previously. The recent Sony leaks indicated Spider-Man 2 cost over $300 million to make, 3 times that of the original game. There's also been plenty of waste within PlayStation recently, such as the cancellation of Naughty Dog's open world Last of Us multiplayer game, which was said to be the most ambitious thing they'd ever made and probably already racked up a pretty juicy price tag. Perhaps it's no surprise that one of the first things new Sony Interactive Entertainment's interim CEO Hiroki Totoki had to say upon taking over for the departing Jim Ryan is that he wanted to increase profit margins, perhaps by being more aggressive with PC releases. And the thing that this article also leaves out is, again, something we've talked about extensively, but is absolutely worth reiterating here, is Sony's interim CEO Hiroki Totoki made it clear that, hey, our studios are not very good with money. We need to correct that. Now, I also want to read a reply in regards to a headline that was circulating. This headline comes from CNBC, and I found it on the PlayStation 5 subreddit. The headline reads, Sony plunged $10 billion of value of stock after its PS5 sales cut, but a bigger issue is near its decade-low games margin, which is fine. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with these headlines, but that the problem with these headlines is it's not so much the headline itself as much as it's just the people, depending on who's reading it, they're like, trust me, based off of the way people are reacting, you better pack it up, guys. You better sell your PS5 while you still can, because it's over for Sony, right? But I want to read this reply from G Funkule on Reddit, and this has almost 1,000 upvotes. And he says, these headlines are so dumb. When a company is worth billions and the price fluctuates a few points either way, their value can easily increase or decrease by $10 billion. When you say a stock dipped 3% or whatever, it's much less alarming and therefore makes a non-interesting headline. And so the headlines, while they aren't wrong, it's the way in which they're being presented that it leaves out that very critical fact that when we are talking about fluctuating stock, right, an increase of 3%, a decrease of 3%, in regards to multi-billion, sometimes multi-trillion dollar corporations, it's really not concerning. It is like, here's the thing that most people won't tell you. Sony absolutely expected this to happen. They knew that when they came out and they have to just tell the shareholders, hey, this is the situation. They absolutely knew some of these shareholders were going to run scared, right? Because it's just the way it is. Like, hey, we're going to hit 21 million instead of our projected 25. Hey, our profit margins are shrinking and we have some work to do. You're talking about shareholders that are like, hey, I just wanted to get some profit here. Doesn't look like that's on the horizon anytime soon. I'm out. But something else that people leave out is just how easily this 10 billion can come back. That's the important part. You're talking about investment. You're talking about stocks. All right. So people just need to relax in the way they are interpreting what is being circulated. I'm not sitting here telling you that, hey, this is good news. It's not. The reality is that Sony has work to do. Things are not ideal. But people also should be very careful not to run with this notion that, hey, man, Sony's in big trouble. Things are dire. It's like, listen, the most concerning thing is the profit margins, right? But here's the thing. When it comes to Sony's profit margins, if it is true, which it seems like it is, that those profit margins are shrinking at the rate that they are due to the ballooning budgets of games, then that's directly in Sony's control. And I think that people need to also be aware of that. You know, Sony, if they have to, will make the necessary cuts to video game budgets to ensure that their profit margins don't shrink any further, to at least preserve where it is now and hopefully get it up, right? Get it up higher to 7%, 8%, back to the, higher percentages that they were before. So I just think it's a little bit strange that people are so hyper fixated on Sony losing $10 billion in stock while simultaneously ignoring all of the other important factors that are actually the things we should be focused on. Like, if you care about this at all, like, that's what we should be focused on. But, again, it's kind of to be expected, I guess. Saying they're just being weirdos. I mean, some people definitely are being a little bit weird about it. And the truth is, like, if you are a avid PlayStation fan, if you're a PlayStation enthusiast, you do want to be, not super concerned, like, but you do want to, you kind of want to root for Sony to be able to figure this problem out, because it is something that I have to imagine is looming over the current leadership for PlayStation, where it's like, look, if we start to become even less profitable than we are now, like if we drop below 6% or 5%, that's when you will start to see real panic start to set in with shareholders, which will have an even, that'll have a big ripple effect potentially on how PlayStation operates. But something that a lot of people are pointing to right now is, once again, something people are pointing to is, Helldivers 2. And it's like, hey, Helldivers 2 is a great reminder that you can make a pretty low cost game. And the assumption is that Helldivers 2 didn't cost anywhere near what a game like Spider-Man 2 cost to make, or Horizon Forbidden West. And it's just gameplay focused, and it can still be a resounding success. The reality is Sony probably made, I don't want to say more money, but probably close to the same amount of profit, right, that they've made on some of their big single player games with this, because this game was probably less than $100 million, and it's doing big numbers, right? So it's something that Sony should definitely consider. It's not so much that I'm not sitting here saying like you should care about Sony's profit margins. No, you definitely shouldn't. Like, that's not your job. Of course not. And it's not mine either. But it's just, if you are concerned about what may or may not happen to future games, right? Like, you have to think about what your expectations currently are for Sony's future games, specifically their AAA games. This is something you definitely want to pay attention to, because if the profit margins are shrinking and the price of the games are going up in terms of their development costs, well, you put two and two together, I think we kind of begin to understand the path forward to a certain extent anyway. Let me see here. We have Josh, you're saying here with another super chat, and I appreciate it, buddy. It's just tiresome to hear Microsoft speak as if they make the rules for the industry, and because they're in a dire spot, means everyone else is and should follow. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, man. That, I think, is, again, man, I think this just boils down to the public-facing presentation that each company is giving. I want to remind people that what we just talked about in regards to Sony's earnings, Sony isn't talking to the public. They're talking to their shareholders. The public has access to that, and what they're saying, of course, and that's why these headlines are being written up. But Sony's not talking to us. Sony's not talking to, these video game news outlets. They're talking to their shareholders. And therefore, they're just getting to the point. And they're not, again, they're just saying it like it is. To whereas I think what Microsoft is trying to do right now, if I had to guess, their marketing team probably sees an opportunity where it's like, okay, look, it kind of reminds me of when during the Xbox business update, I think it was Phil Spencer who had mentioned that, like, we had to lay off 1,900 people, but it's happening all across the industry. Like, basically saying, like, hey, it's not just us, right? And there was this big kind of like emphasis on the health of Microsoft and Xbox. And to be honest, like, the only real difference between Sony and Microsoft right now is Sony is not willing to talk publicly or to the public or to the fan base about the current issues that they're facing. To whereas if you watch that Microsoft business update, the reason why I think it at certain points came off so cringe was just simply because it was very clear that Microsoft felt like they had to not only speak to the investors, but they had to kind of sugarcoat things a little bit anyway. Or if not sugarcoat it, just kind of have this very like you're kind of pointing out here, this kind of like, hey, we're going to figure out a path forward here. And we're, I guess you could say it's confidence to a degree, but it was very expertly executed. And I know people, that's true. Yeah, that's true as well. Good point. Lore Canyon, you're saying it's because it leaked. Yeah, you're right. You do have to wonder how Microsoft would have presented this if the leaks never happened. But it was expertly executed. I didn't really enjoy it that much, obviously, but you just have to wonder, like, what would happen if Sony did what Microsoft just did, right? What if Sony had 3 of their executives sit down and be interviewed, and they said similar things where it's about the health of PlayStation, it's about the health of the brand, and, these are why we're making these decisions. People would be like, oh, okay. That's how people would react. You'd see some extreme reactions, of course, in certain corners of the internet, but generally speaking, people would walk away and be like, well, okay, like that feels like maybe it could have been a blog post or something, but all right. And the reason for that is because, again, it's just they took control of the narrative. That is the difference between Sony and Microsoft. I guess if I had to boil it down, Josh, because you really got me thinking about this specifically, if I had to boil it down, the difference is Sony doesn't care to take control of the narrative. Microsoft does. And that's exactly what Microsoft does. They say, look, we can control this. Like, we can, depending on what we say and how we say it and how we present it, we can control this. Sony, on the other hand, like, I just want to remind people, like, what happened with Insomniac, right? Like, Sony didn't even acknowledge it for days. Like, they didn't say anything. And the only acknowledgement we ever really got was just Insomniac saying, like, yeah, we're aware, and this sucks. And it's just so clear that the way Sony operates is we don't care about the narratives. We don't care about the headlines. We don't care about the news cycle. We don't care about the doom and gloom. We don't care about the people who are super excited and, constantly propping everything we do up. They don't care either way. And I think that is a very conscientious choice they're making, because they just are viewing it as, we have a business to run, and that's what we're going to do. Like, we're not here to be friends. We're not here to, bullshit you. We're not here to comfort you either, right? Like, we're just here to make money off of our products. And that's it. And I think that is sometimes a dangerous way for Sony to go about it, because I think it really is just kind of handing it to Microsoft, where it's like, if you're Microsoft, you're like, well, Sony isn't going to say anything, so we will. Microsoft is able to completely manipulate in any way they see fit the general public, if you will, through the headlines, through how they control everything they say. And Sony is not. Sony just doesn't. It's fascinating, man. It is. It's fascinating to see the difference. And I think what we just saw, again, man, like, we saw, just to reflect here for a moment, in the last 2.5 weeks, we saw the most amount of panic I personally have ever seen towards Microsoft and their gaming brand with Xbox. I've never seen panic like that, even during the Xbox One era. Like, this was like next level. And Microsoft decided, okay, we have to get this under control. My question is this: before I ask this question, just continuing with the reflecting here, there was sheer panic for like a week straight. Microsoft came out, they did their business update, and after that business update, all was well. It's like nothing ever happened. You know what I mean? It's like nothing ever happened. So they did their job, where they're like, look, we have to get this under control, but we also have to make it work in our favor. And they did that. Microsoft somehow, some way, made it work in their favor. We're like, dude, everybody's like fine now, or seemingly, like, the general public is totally fine with Microsoft and everything that just happened over the past 2.5 weeks. Meanwhile, Sony, they didn't really do anything except come out here and do their earnings report. And they just talked directly to investors, told them what's up, told them the reality, told them the truth. And all you see now are just these headlines that, again, some of them are fine, but they definitely are having an impact and an influence on the way people are viewing the PlayStation brand. And when you factor all of this in, the question I have is, what if there was rumors and leaks for Sony, like the same types that we just saw for Microsoft, where let's just say like next week, all these rumors come out that like all these future PlayStation games are coming to PC day one, and some games are even just a few games are going to go to Xbox or something. I think there would be the same exact reaction. You would see the same level of panic. But here's my question. Do you think Sony, current Sony, would say, we're going to release a 22-minute business update on our PlayStation YouTube channel? I think we all know the answer to that question. The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. Sony doesn't, like, dude, if that's what Sony planned to do and it leaked, they wouldn't care. They would just say, well, all right, it's out there. Let's just keep trucking on. Let's just keep going. And, maybe could it alter their plans? Of course it could alter their plans, I guess. But I just think it's important to acknowledge that at the end of the day, believe it or not, Josh, Sony and Microsoft, while they are doing different things, they are in a similar position. And the reason for that is because, frankly, almost every video game platform holder and every video game publisher is in that same position. And that is that this industry is folding right now. It's shrinking rapidly. It's readjusting. It's rebalancing. There's a lot of uncertainty because it's clear that things are changing. They're changing whether these corporations want them to or not. They're changing whether the fans or the gamers or the market wants it to or not. They're changing. And that change is being dictated by a myriad of different things. It's being dictated by the overinflation we saw, or not overinflation, but I guess you could say, the ballooning, right, of everything the ballooning of the gaming industry, I should say, during COVID. So the shrink was always going to be there. We were always going to see a big shrink just because of that. But that's compounded by the economic woes and what's happening to the world economy, right? And it's having such a massive, abrupt impact on everything. And so if you want to doom and gloom anything, doom and gloom the fact that there are some serious problems in this industry when it comes to finances, as there is pretty much everywhere else right now. And these companies are not, the only priority for these companies is the health. And that's the one thing I will say that both Sony and Microsoft absolutely would shake hands on and agree with right now. It's the health of our business and keeping it going. That's it. That's all it is. Because these things can spiral, man. That's the truth too. Nobody's safe out here, really. I mean, we could talk about how much Sony's worth as a company, how much Microsoft is worth as a company, but sometimes there can be, we've seen it happen. There's like this domino effect where companies can just, they can end up spiraling, and it really is based off of, okay, things are not ideal right now, and things are maybe looking a little bad in some areas. What do you do next? What do you do next? And it's what you choose to do next that will ultimately determine like whether you're going to spiral out or get it back on track or just keep it going, right? Keep it going and keep it as stabilized as you can. Primus Gaming, you're saying Xbox is making more for Microsoft than Windows. How are they in trouble? Well, let me ask you this. When Phil Spencer said to you during that Xbox business update that every decision they make is to keep the long-term health of the Xbox brand in mind, what do you think he was saying? Like, what does that translate to? What does that really mean? I'll translate it for you. What Phil is saying is that the way things are going right now, if we don't make changes and adjustments, then the long-term health of the Xbox brand is in jeopardy. That's what he said. So you shouldn't be asking me why Xbox is in trouble, because the truth is, it's not that they're in trouble as much as it's all of these companies have the potential of being in big trouble if they don't make adjustments. That's what I'm trying to say. Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, every other video game publisher, if they don't make the proper adjustments at a time like this, they are running a great risk of finding themselves in deep, serious trouble in the coming years, because things have changed and they are changing rapidly, and they're not going to wait, right? So, like Primus Gaming, dude, I'm not saying, listen, man, relax. I'm not the one saying that there's something really wrong with Xbox or they're in trouble. I'm just telling you that's what Phil said. Phil said everything they do now is with the long-term health of the Xbox brand in mind. And the only thing I'm trying to take from that is that, well, that's exactly what Sony's going to do too. It's just common sense. So, oh, you're saying you're not talking to me? Well, it's hard to tell anymore, you know? I just assume anybody I see saying something in the chat, it's directed towards me. All right, let me see. We have Alex Mercer, the prototype, we have Jeff B. Gaming saying, MBG, we also have to keep the context that we are in an economic recession and product inflation is high since COVID. The PlayStation does need to cut the waste. Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm speaking to here. I mean, I know that this isn't the most exciting conversation to have. It sucks, frankly, because everybody's feeling the effects of it. And, you know, these companies, believe it or not, they're not immune to it either, right? Like, they're going to feel the effects of it in the same way, just on a different scale entirely. And so my hope for just talking about Sony specifically, really quick, we have Irfan in the chat. I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, by the way. I'm saying Irfan, but maybe it's ER fan. I don't know. You're saying MBG news from Hiroki Totoki. He did clarify that multi-platform means PlayStation and PC, not Xbox and Switch. Yeah, I mean, maybe some people did need that clarification, but I thought that was pretty obvious. And I think most people thought that was pretty obvious, right? That it's like, he's not talking about Xbox and Switch, right? Like, no, I think if Sony was talking about Xbox and Switch, they would definitely, for the sake of their shareholders, need to say that specifically, because that's what Microsoft did. You know, I think that some people, again, they kind of overlooked that multiple times. Xbox and Microsoft executives said, like, yeah, we're going to be a great publisher on PlayStation and Switch. And I understand that people are like, oh, they're just talking about games like Call of Duty. It's like, yeah, probably, but that's probably their subtle little way of kind of squeezing it in there that, like, hey, we're telling you straight up, you know, that we're looking at Switch and PlayStation as a place to be a viable publisher. And so I feel like if Sony were to do the same thing, they would have to be very explicit about it, where they would have to say, like, PlayStation, console, PC, and Xbox and Switch, or Microsoft and Nintendo. You know, I feel like that's what they would have to say. But Jeff B. Gaming, absolutely, man. I'm all for Sony, hopefully, like you're saying, cutting the waste and being able to, you know, become a more efficient, more lean game producing machine. That's the hope here. So hopefully they can achieve that. We have Alex Mercer, the prototype, saying, I have cleaned it after the first overheat, and GTA 6 is going to be huge. So I'd rather have a good performance boost to handle it. Respectfully, MBG, LOL. Yeah, absolutely. I'll be honest with you, man, and we're going to get into this conversation in just a moment here. The PS5 Pro is going to be very, very appealing, I think, to a large portion of the gaming landscape because of GTA 6. Because what you're saying right now, look, a lot of people have perfectly functioning PlayStation 5s that don't ever overheat, right? And they maybe keep them in pristine, perfect, clean condition. But as soon as the PS5 Pro drops and they know GTA 6 is coming not that long after, and they know, most importantly, that the best way to play GTA 6 is going to be on the PS5 Pro, yeah, a lot of people are going to, I think, upgrade for that reason alone. So definitely don't think you're alone there, Alex Mercer. Certainly not. We have Fishy Queefs coming in here with a $10 super chat saying, what's up, MBG? I've been completely hooked on Helldivers 2. I haven't had this much fun with the game in a while. And I also got the platinum the other day too. It was almost as hard as my jumping taco platinum. Oh man, I don't know what's more embarrassing, saying that the jumping taco platinum was difficult for you to achieve, or the fact that you have obtained the jumping taco platinum. I don't know, man. But yeah, I think I have about 71% of the trophies unlocked in Helldivers 2. And I can't say that I'm like completely hooked on it, as in like I'm addicted to it. I feel like I'm in a healthier place with the game. Not to say that you're in an unhealthy place necessarily, but I feel like it's a game that I can get 3 to 4 rounds, if you want to call them that. I don't think it's fair to call them rounds, but 3 or 4 sessions in it, and I'm like, okay, I got my fill. Like, I'm going to take a little break now, and then I'll come back to it, and I'll do like another 2, and I'll take a break, and come back to it. I'm not finding myself feeling like I want to play the game for like 6 or 7 hours straight or something like that. Not saying that's what you're doing, but there have been games where I've gotten that kind of itch for before. That doesn't really happen to me these days, though. Corey, you're saying in the chat, I could be mistaken, but I always thought those 4 little Xbox titles were merely signs that Microsoft is just testing the waters outside their core market. What do y'all think? Yeah, that's exactly what it is. There's no reason for me or anybody else to say anything definitively, because I think Microsoft communicated, and just to clarify here, just so we're all on the same page, Microsoft did make it clear that we're experimenting and we're testing the waters. I made the hardline stance of once they open Pandora's box, it can't be closed, and I'll admit I was wrong about that. It was hard not to see it that way at the time, but it makes me realize that the truth is I was wrong, in that if Microsoft releases 4 games and they perform well, and they're like, you know what, let's release 4 more, but those next 4 perform badly, they could at any moment in time say, okay, we're done. But I just think where some people, I think, are not quite understanding the goal, I think sometimes people get so fixated on, oh my God, it's like, it's not that serious, or oh my God, it's actually happening, that they kind of miss the most important part, which lies in the middle, and that is, this is going to make them more money. You know what I mean? You're saying that's exactly what you're doing. You're playing it like 6 hours a day. You weren't kidding, man, saying you're addicted to Helldivers 2. Well, hey, man, enjoy it. Enjoy it, bro. Just make sure you make some room in the servers. Leave some room for the rest of us. I'm just kidding. But that's it, man. I just think that people need to understand that PlayStation and Nintendo look very appealing to Microsoft right now. How could they not? Microsoft has these games, and they have 2 platforms, 2 install bases. The PS5 with nearly 60 million, the Nintendo Switch with well over 100 million. And the Nintendo Switch 2 coming, which is presumably going to do just as well. Right? And these 2 platforms, the player base is already conditioned to buy games. They're not conditioned to expect games day one, or most games on a service that they're subscribed to. It's, of course there's some expectation there, but nothing like what we see with Game Pass. And so I guess I just want to say that people do need to keep in mind that Microsoft's expectation by bringing Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush and Pentiment and Grounded is these games are going to sell, and we're going to make more money on them. And don't get me wrong, like, they could flop. That's the thing, man. It's in our hands, basically. Like, if we want to see Microsoft do this more, if anybody out there wants to see them do this more, whether that be actual Xbox fans or people on these platforms, it's in our hands. Buy the game if you're interested in it. Support it if you're interested in it. But something tells me that these games would have to flop pretty badly for Microsoft to walk away and say this isn't worth it, because it's just extra money for them. money that they otherwise were never going to get. So in that sense, it's practically pure profit. You know what I mean? And you can kind of see how Sony is viewing PC probably the exact same way. They have been for some time, but even more so now, where they're like, listen, that's profit ready to be made. That's it. That's all it is. We have Ice Rezo here saying Microsoft does lead the gaming industry. People need to stop thinking about the consoles only. Nvidia, AMD, and Intel doesn't do anything without collaborating with Microsoft. Game development is done on PC. Well, I think it comes down to what leading the gaming industry means to an individual. Because I could tell you right now, there are a lot of people that wholeheartedly disagree with what you're saying, Ice. There are a lot of people that feel like Microsoft doesn't lead anything in this industry. But you're pointing out specific things, such as, these different companies collaborating with Microsoft, saying game development is done on PC. I mean, listen, man. The reality for Sony and Nintendo is they would be just fine if Microsoft disappeared from the gaming industry tomorrow. They would be. I think the same could be said for Microsoft, right? But there's a little bit more skepticism there. I disagree with you when you say Microsoft does lead the gaming industry. The reason I disagree is simple. When I think about what Microsoft has brought to the table since the time they entered the industry compared to Sony and compared to Nintendo, I just don't think it stacks up. That's not to say that Microsoft hasn't brought anything to the table. Microsoft absolutely has brought things to the table. They have. But it's like, I don't feel like anything they've done, especially recently, is, I don't want to say like helping, but maybe some people are a little bit too quick to make it seem like everything they're doing is like the most detrimental thing. But I just think about what they're doing with Activision Blizzard. I think about honestly, like, how they're basically the ones out here saying, like, yeah, we're not going to try to out console Sony and Nintendo. And I get it. It's because, they're looking beyond the console. And it's like, well, listen, I don't have a problem with any of these companies wanting to look beyond the console, but I just think it's like, why though? Like, what are you doing or what are you not doing that's leading you to have to go in that direction? And I think it's kind of obvious that Microsoft, they have had successful games, but they have struggled to reach that level with their games. And maybe they'll get there, but I don't know, Ice. I guess it's to each their own, man. Like, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with you feeling that way. I don't see it that way. I'm just not exactly sure what Microsoft is leading. Like, if you're saying that Microsoft is well integrated in the industry, you know what I mean? Where it's like, I just want to remind you, man, like, you're saying that game development is done on PC. That's great. But why is it that we've heard this generation that developers have struggled more so with porting their games or developing their games on the Xbox Series X and S, whereas we've heard the opposite with the PS5? Like, why is it that developers have been saying that it's actually easier to develop on the PS5? To me, that's like the opposite of that's like, to me, that almost seems like a mistake. Like, how is that even possible? But that's it. And so, Ice, it's not to like, I don't think it matters, to be honest. Like, if we just were to boil it down to its essence, I don't think it matters. I think that how we should view it is this way. Both Sony and Microsoft have a lot to gain by trying to do everything they can to capture this market. And the only thing that truly differs is how they believe they're going to do that. And it's up to us to decide individually what we think is most appealing. Because I'll tell you right now, Ice, the things you just listed about like Microsoft and why you believe that Microsoft leads the industry, I don't even think about that when I think about who's leading the industry. What I think about is like, well, the first thing I think about is what appeals to me, right? So it automatically becomes a me thing where it's like, what is appealing to me? And then I evaluate the landscape and then I determine, well, the things that Sony is doing, they seem to be very appealing to me. But then I also realize, well, it's not just appealing to me, it's appealing to a lot of people, right? Like millions of people, tens of millions, over 100+ million people. Like, well, they must be doing something right if they're appealing to that many people, And I see how well their games do at times. I'm like, well, these games definitely appeal to me. And look, they're doing well too. So they must be doing something right. So I guess I just have a completely different perspective and a different viewpoint from you in regards to this. But again, at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters. Like if I say so-and-so leads the game industry and you say so-and-so leads the game industry, at the end of the day, neither things matter. You know what I mean? Because that doesn't necessarily determine, like my opinion on that and your opinion on that doesn't determine the actual outcome and what happens next. Let me see here. We have KendallFire22 saying, do you think Sony will do any PlayStation Store marketing to support these Xbox games? Why would they bother when Xbox is trying to steal their customers? No, I don't think so. The only time I think Sony is willing to do that is for their own games. Like you're making it sound like for free. Microsoft could and probably is likely, I would say, to actually pay Sony to, get front page space on the PlayStation Store. But I don't think Sony would do that for free. Sony, I don't think, is just going to say, oh, well, it's a Microsoft game, so we should. Yeah, I think it's exactly like Sony just looks at it, I think, as they would any other publisher. It's like, you want to bring our game and sell it to on our store? Okay, sure. What's that? You want to be on the front page? You want to have some kind of marketing? Well, you have to pay for that. You have to pay for that. Yeah, absolutely. The only time I think Sony does that for free is, well, with their own games, obviously, because it's their game. Or sometimes with their partners, right? Where they stand more to gain because of a partnership or something. So, like, for example, Sony's not going to tell Arrowhead, you have to pay us to advertise. At least I don't think so. You don't have to pay us to advertise your game. Like, we own this IP. Like, of course, we're going to put it on the front page, front center. Something like that. So, yeah, I don't think I do understand where you're coming from, KendallFire. I do, because you're basically just wondering if is there like an extra allure there, like, hey, this was an Xbox game, now it's on PS5, buy it. But that truthfully will benefit Microsoft more than it benefits Sony. Microsoft gets the 70% rip, Sony gets the 30%. All right, we're going to move on to the main topic of discussion for this stream today. That is talking about the PlayStation 5 Pro. So here's the report. Sony is likely to release a refreshed version of the PlayStation 5 this year. This is what analysts told CNBC after the company cut its forecast for sales of its flagship console. The move would be designed to boost interest in the PlayStation 5 and offer a souped-up piece of hardware ready for the release of Grand Theft Auto 6 in 2025, one of the decade's most hotly anticipated games, the analyst said. Sony was not immediately available for comment when contacted by CNBC. See, even when Sony has a chance to say something that could generate, you know, excitement or some type of positivity, you're like, nah. Although it's smart of them, save it for the proper reveal. But it says here, first released in November 2020, Sony's PS5 is now more than 3 years old. The Japanese gaming giant cut its forecast last week for PS5 sales for the fiscal year ending in March from 25 million units to 21 million units. An executive said last week during the company's earnings call that Sony is expecting a gradual decline in unit sales from the next fiscal year. When this has happened in the past console cycles, gaming firms have looked to bring out a refreshed piece of hardware to reinvigorate sales. For example, Sony launched a Pro version of the PlayStation 4, the previous generation console, around 3 years after the PS4 was initially launched. Analysts are now expecting a PlayStation 5 Pro from Sony. There seems to be a broad consensus in the game industry that Sony is indeed preparing a launch of a PS5 Pro in the second half of 2024. Serkan Toto, CEO of Tokyo-based games consultancy Canton Games, told CNBC. And Sony will want to make sure to have a great piece of hardware ready when GTA 6 hits in 2025, a launch that will be a shot in the arm for the entire gaming industry. So far, Sony launched a slightly upgraded PS5 last year, as well as a handheld console called the PlayStation Portal, but the PS5 Pro would likely be a much bigger upgrade. Even as expectations of a new console rise, Sony is grappling with a big issue that profit margins at its key gaming business are sitting near decade lows. On the earnings call, Sony management said the aim for its gaming business is to optimize sales with a greater emphasis on the balance with profits. George J is what I will call him because there's no chance I'm pronouncing that last name. The senior analyst at Omida said that this could mean that even when the PS5 Pro comes out, Sony may not cut the price of the current PS5, as has been the trend in the past. Therefore, a scenario where Sony launches a PS5 Pro but still experiences a declining year-on-year hardware sales is very much within the realms of possibility. So, yeah, this is this is something that is fascinating to me, where we are looking at a situation where Sony might be getting ready to launch a PS5 Pro, and it's going to coincide with seemingly the launch. Well, I don't say coincide, but it's prepared for the launch of GTA 6. And the thing that's most interesting to me about this is when you read this, what the analyst, I think Serkan Toto, said. He said that when GTA 6 comes out, it's going to be a shot in the arm, basically, like a boost for the entire industry. And then when you look at Sony's expectations and, again, Sony's just giving it to us straight where they're like, we're expecting a decline in PS5 sales. That is factoring in the PS5 Pro. It does seem like they're not going to reduce the price of the PS5 when the Pro comes out. To be honest, I wasn't expecting that to begin with. It seems like the PS5 is going to remain at $500, but the Pro is likely to be $600. It could be more expensive than $600. It could be $650. It could be, well, it almost sounds ridiculous to assume it would be $700. I do not think that's the case. But either way, Sony will try to sell the PS5 Pro at a profit, absolutely. But here's the thing. I want to highlight this because this is something that has gone super unreported. Like, in fact, I have hardly seen anybody at all talk about this. One of the things that Sony revealed during their earnings, and this is very important in understanding why Sony is saying we expect a decline in PS5 sales year over year, where they're not looking very optimistic. One of the things Sony said is that they feel as though they have no ability right now to read the data. They feel as though what happened with COVID completely messed up their ability to properly evaluate the data and therefore predict what happens next with the PS5 console sales-wise. So when I take that into account, and then I take into account what they're saying, where they basically told their investors we're not going to be able to reduce the price of the PS5, and now we're hearing of a PS5 Pro, right? I can kind of begin to understand why Sony is just saying, yeah, we're going to probably drop sales, like we're probably going to see a decline. Because if you can't read the data and you don't know what to expect, you're kind of running a risk by just telling your investors like, oh yeah, it'll be great. We don't know, but it'll be great, right? It's safer, especially given, again, the economic realities right now, to just say, yeah, maybe we're not going to sell as much. Maybe we did peak sales wise. Maybe it's going to be kind of tough times ahead for everybody. But I'm saying all this because there is still every chance that the PS5 Pro could do way more for Sony than expected. And I do think if the PS5 Pro does more for Sony than they expect, it will be because of GTA 6. See, this is what's strange to me, though. What's strange to me is we've seen over the past couple of years what big third-party games can do for console sales. We've seen these big juggernaut third-party games come out, and Sony, in some cases, had the marketing rights to them, and we just saw the PS5 sales explode and do incredibly well. I find it interesting, conservative, very conservative, that, well, hold on now. Maybe what Sony is actually telling us is, hey, we don't think GTA 5 is releasing before March of next year. Because you know what? I just thought about this. Sony's fiscal year ends March 2025. GTA 6 is confirmed for 2025, but not early 2025. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Sony, if I had to guess, they're probably sitting here thinking like, yeah, GTA 6 probably isn't coming out in January, February, March of 2025. So we probably shouldn't bank on that game being, like we shouldn't tell our investors like, hey, we're expecting an increase in PS5 sales. It seems likely that's going to occur when GTA 6 comes out. But I want to talk about how appealing GTA 6 is going to be on the PS5 Pro. Because most people are going to be playing GTA 6. You're saying there's important Totoki news on VGC. Uh-oh. Important Totoki news on VGC? Let me see if I can find it. Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Hiroki Totoki dropping the hammer on Bungie. All right, I'll talk about that. Let me finish up this thought, and then we'll talk about that, because yeah, that's very interesting to me. But I want to continue to talk about the PS5 Pro here, and I want to talk about how potent the PS5 Pro GTA 6 combination can be for the console market, right? There seems to be so much doom and gloom, and I understand why, regarding the console market, but GTA 6 is not launching on PC. It will eventually, but we don't know when. It could be years later, could be 1 year later. We don't know. All we know is that Rockstar confirmed that when GTA 6 launches, it's going to be launching on the PS5 and the Xbox Series consoles. And so by that point, the PlayStation 5, assuming that GTA 6 launches mid to late 2025, the PS5 install base is going to be pretty significant. Probably, 75 million, something like that, right? That's my assumption anyway. Maybe more than that, actually. Maybe between 75 and 80 million. But we know it's going to do well on the PS5. But my question is, how much is it going to matter to people to know that the definitive version of GTA 6 will be on the PS5 Pro, at least for a while? Again, GTA 6 will launch on PC eventually, but for maybe the first year, maybe the first 2 years, again, we don't know the timeline, and neither does anybody else. And because of that, all we will know until the PC version is announced is that the definitive version of GTA 6 is on a PS5 Pro. My question is, what is that going to do for the PS5 Pro? Because I'm thinking it's going to do a lot for it. Like, I think that if there's anything out there that's going to sell the PS5 Pro, like, I think Sony's games are going to sell the Pro, of course, but I think GTA 6 more than anything is going to move Pro units, especially because apparently the PS5 Pro isn't going to have competition. That, to me, is the most fascinating part. So it's not even like people are going to have to make a decision where it's like, I want the most powerful console on the market so I can have the best version of GTA 6. They're not even going to have to decide between a PlayStation or an Xbox. It's just going to be the PS5 Pro. And I could be totally wrong. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if I was wrong, if it turns out that actually, no, everybody's just like, I'm just buying a regular PS5, or I'm just buying a Xbox or Series S or whatever, you know? I could be totally wrong. And we got Whiskey Gaming coming in here, keeping this membership train going today. Whiskey Gaming, my friend, thank you so much. Longtime member coming in, dropping 5 memberships for you guys. Whiskey, I really appreciate that, buddy. You just brought us up to 17 members on the day.
Thank you.
Love to see it. So we're very close, guys. We're very close to hitting our first goal, which is always great to see. And let me read some of these chats. We have Whiskey Gaming with his milestone chat. He says, "What's up, guys? Been MIA due to work travel and some personal issues. Hope all is well and everyone is having fun spreading some democracy for Super Earth." Oh yeah, trust me, dude. Trust me. Everybody around here has been having a lot of fun spreading democracy. Absolutely. So you don't have to worry about that. And yeah, it's nice to see you back, man. Hopefully you'll be able to continue to partake in the streams. And yeah, man, but I get it, you know. That's the thing. Life, right? Travel. Sometimes you have some problems you got to deal with. Totally understandable. But either way, Whiskey Gaming, I really appreciate you stopping by, and thank you so much for dropping some membership gifts for us, man. Bungie is trending. My throat is bothering me today. It's sore because I think that the air is super dry. It's really, really cold out and windy, and the air, I don't have a humidifier in here. It's like super dry. I might as well just finish this. Cypherpunk, you're saying will be trash if the PS5 Pro can't run in full 4K 60 FPS without being in performance mode. Without it being in a performance mode. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, Cypherpunk. I've talked extensively in the past about how Sony is going to market the PS5 Pro. And my biggest concern is that they're going to have trouble marketing it. Maybe not. I just worry that they might either focus on the wrong things or they might not know what to focus on. But if I had to assume, like, we're still going to listen, when we buy PS5 Pros, we're still going to have fidelity modes in games. You know, like, there will still be a fidelity mode and a performance mode. But I think really what it's going to look like is if you play, let's say, GTA 6 in fidelity mode on PS5 Pro, you will get native 4K. It will be at 30 FPS. You're going to get like ray tracing and effects, like lighting. It's going to, everything's going to be like maxed out, right? Not like, I don't want to say to like the highest possible degree that we'll ever see. Certainly not. But it will be maxed out. But if you want to play the performance mode, I think what you're going to be looking at is what's the difference between playing GTA 6 in the performance mode on PS5 Pro versus the base PS5? I think the difference simply comes down to, on the PS5 Pro, you will get, if not native 4K, there will be. So I just want to point this out because this is something we've actually seen Sony working on. Apparently, one of the things that Sony might reveal with the PS5 Pro is a new technique that they've been working on, like a new way to, basically Sony's own version of DLSS, like their own. There's a word I'm looking, proprietary. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Their own proprietary upscaling technique that apparently Mark Cerny has been working on for the, again, rumors for the PS5 Pro, where this is what they're going to reveal, where it's like, guess what? This game is going to look native 4K. It's not actually running at native 4K. It's this, it's a new rendering technique we've come up with, and it also saves us a ton of headroom. So we can actually, so basically, we will be able to achieve, native 4K at 30 FPS. Or sorry, 60 FPS, not 30 FPS, 60 FPS. And I think that this is just something that it's going to have to come in the form of how Sony talks about it and what it, like how they can present that. But I get what you're saying, man. That to me, that's the biggest hurdle that I think Sony has with the PS5 Pro, is just properly conveying to people, like, why should I buy this? Like, what is the upgrade here? What's the difference here? I mean, there was like a report that Sony's going to have like an 8K performance mode. And I'm like, dude, listen, I'm going to be pretty disappointed, truthfully, if Sony comes out and is like, here's an 8K performance mode. Because I'm going to be like, so that's pointless. Like that doesn't help me at all. Like, actually, that makes me less inclined to buy it because I can't do anything with 8K. I think what Sony should focus on, and I hope they focus on, is higher resolutions, higher frame rates. And when I say higher frame rates, more games being able to run at 120 FPS at higher resolutions. Focus on ray tracing. Focus on essentially just, I think if Sony wants to appeal to the audience that will buy a PS5 Pro, just basically tell us, like, hey guys, we're going to take already, like, what are already really good graphics, and we're going to like max them out, like, as far as they can go. Like, we're going to double it, And I think that would be, I mean, obviously they would have to articulate it better than that. I don't expect Mark Cerny to come out on stage and be like, yo guys, we just doubled the graphics, so enjoy. Like, I don't think that's what Mark Cerny is going to say. But I think that's what they really need to focus on. Focus on the games, absolutely. I think this is another great advantage or opportunity. This year is a great opportunity for Sony to. I'm telling you, man, if they play their cards right, they're going to leave a lot of people, I think, feeling like, wow, all right, Sony's back on track, baby. It depends. It depends on how they play their cards, because there is like a double whammy, I think. That's just, it's right there, Sony. If you can do this, I think you're going to win a lot of people over. The double whammy comes in the form of, here are some of the new first-party games that you guys have been waiting to see. Maybe it's Ben's new IP. Maybe it's Santa Monica's new IP. Maybe it's Naughty Dog's new IP. Maybe it's Ghost of Tsushima 2. It's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they're working on, but they show a couple of those games. They show that, and then they reveal the PS5 Pro, and they reveal that, yeah, these games are running on the PS5 Pro. I'm telling you, man, that would be a big shot in the arm for, I think, everybody. Because if you're not sold on the PS5 Pro and you don't really care about that part, you're sold on the games. And that's the part you care about. But if you are somebody who already was expecting those games, but now you're also seeing the PS5 Pro, now your excitement just doubled. For some people, anyway. So I think it's a good opportunity, for Sony to just kind of. I hate to put it this way. I really hate to put it this way, and it's for lack of a better term, but to basically relaunch the PS5. You know, because I know when people hear that, they're like, "Oh, well, so that everything up until this point was pointless." No, but that leads me to another conversation I want to have with you guys. The latter half of the PS5's life cycle. Before I do that, though, I want to go over this Bungie report. Yeah, I mean, imagine what Wolverine's going to look like on the PS5 Pro, dude. I bet you Death Stranding 2 is targeting. I wouldn't even be surprised if what we saw. Look, I don't know about you guys, but when I saw Death Stranding 2, I was like, these graphics look unbelievable. Like, some of the shots in that gameplay that we saw looked unbelievable. I mean, they looked so photorealistic. I'm like, this is insane. But then again, we also haven't seen what the PS5 can really do. So, if I think Hideo Kojima did confirm that what we saw on Death Stranding 2, that is running on a PS5. So I'm looking at that and I'm like, so the PS5 can do that. What the hell is the PS5 Pro going to do? I'm thinking what the Pro is going to do is it's going to run that at 60 FPS. That's what I'm thinking. And to me, that's like, okay, dude, I'm sold. So I don't know, man. I feel like I feel like Death Stranding is really the first look that we're getting. Like, I mean, I know there's Spider-Man 2, but to me, looking at Death Stranding 2 and that trailer and some of the landscapes and the way it looked, I'm like, okay, the Decima engine now being pushed again. I think we're finally entering that phase where we're going to start in the next 12 months or so, 12 to 14 months, maybe 12 to 16 months, really starting to see games that are like, oh shit. Okay, now we're beginning to see what the PS5 can do when it's like fully optimized. That's my hope, anyway. All right, Miguel, you're saying the PlayStation Store takes 30% of every sale. They're okay. Yeah. I think you're right about that, dude. I don't remember where I heard this, but a little while back, I heard somebody, I forget who, maybe you guys will know and you can remind me. I heard somebody say, like, what if Sony would have just like stopped making first party games? I mean, obviously that would be horrible for us. Stop making first party games, shut down all their studios. Would they be okay? Like, could they even make more money because they're not spending all this money on making these expensive games? And I'm like, well, that's a scary thought. But you do have to ask yourself, like, no, I mean, obviously that's not realistic. But if Sony does reduce the amount of money they're potentially spending, but in some cases wasting on game development, they'll be okay, I think, for sure. The more I think about it, it's like, yeah, they would definitely be okay. Wait a minute, not feeling that idea. Yeah, no, I don't blame you. That would be terrible. All right, Cobb Sanity, you're saying MBG, I can see GTA 6 also on the PlayStation 6 and the PlayStation 6 Pro and the PS7. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. GTA 6 will probably be on the PlayStation 8. Or sorry, the PlayStation 7 Pro. And then the PlayStation 8. Yeah. Definitely. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy how many different versions of GTA 6 we're going to get. We have Sal says here with I don't know what currency that is, but it's 50,000. I have no idea what currency that is, but that's a lot. He's saying, I hope Sony takes notes from Helldivers 2 and Ghost of Tsushima Legends that PvE is the way to go if Sony wants to double down on live service games. I think so. Yeah, like it is interesting to see that they're especially with Helldivers 2, that there are these games where it's like there doesn't have to be any player versus player element, and they can just skyrocket, and people just love them. Yeah, he just dropped a $50,000 super chat. I don't think so. Well, here's the thing, Sal. I'm in agreement. I would like to see Sony continue down this route of having like PvE focused games, certainly, especially with live service. But I'm not against them having other offerings that are more competitive, right? For example, not to bring it up again, but it has to be brought up. Concord, right? Concord is just a PvP game. It's not even PvE. It's specifically PvP. It almost sounds like it could be like a hero shooter, which I don't know if I like the sound of that. But I'm not against Sony putting out some PvP stuff, but I can see how like they might be looking at this and thinking, maybe this is the side of multiplayer and live service that we should put more emphasis on, because it seems to be speaking to both PS5 and PC players. There's an audience for this, clearly. So definitely something worth thinking about, and we'll find out, man. We will find out. I want to read this article here you guys were telling me to check out. Let me bring it up. Oh, sorry, guys. I got to adjust my... Man, I'm so stiff right now. My muscles are stiff. Did a pretty intense workout yesterday. I'm feeling it today. We have this article that was just written up by VGC. Sony president wants Bungie to be better at assuming accountability for development timelines. Sony president and PlayStation chairman Hiroki Totoki has said Bungie could be better at assuming responsibility for its development timelines. During a Q&A session following Sony's latest financial results briefing, Totoki was asked for an update on Bungie and whether he had any initiatives planned for that studio in the next financial year. Totoki replied that while he was impressed by Bungie's ability as a video game developer, he felt it could make improvements from a business perspective. I visited the Bungie studios and had meetings with the management, he said, and I saw that employees working at the studios were highly motivated, showing great creativity as well as impressive knowledge of live service. However, I also felt that there was room for improvement from a business perspective with regard to areas such as the use of business expenses and assuming accountability for development timelines. I hope to continue the dialogue and come up with some good solutions. When Totoki originally answered this question last week, the live English translation provided by Sony referred to PlayStation Studios in general. And so this is fascinating because this is, listen, man, it's not like he's sitting here saying like, yeah, so like Bungie was a mistake and we're in trouble. No. But he's also, not saying that it's perfect or it's great. I think it's pretty obvious that, yeah, so that's the thing. That's a question I have too. Is this stating that when Hiroki Totoki originally said this about PlayStation Studios, he was actually specifically referring to Bungie? Because I will say, in reading this quote, it sounds almost identical to the previous quote we read, except you just replaced PlayStation Studios with Bungie. Okay, yeah, maybe that's what that last line was trying to point out. He said Bungie, the translator said PlayStation Studios. Very interesting. Very interesting. That would explain a lot. Although I still do think that there's probably other... I don't know, though. I don't know. Because, like, when I think about what he said about, like, the original quote about PlayStation Studios, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, I guess what I'm saying is the logic that he's bringing to the table for Bungie probably does also apply to PlayStation Studios. However, I would not be surprised if Bungie is the absolute worst offender here. I think it's clear that Bungie's the worst offender, dude. Like, it seems to me that it almost seems to me that when Jim Ryan and Herman Hulst were making this deal with Bungie, they like didn't really care that much about the finances. Like I almost wonder if Jim Ryan was a little bit blinded by the live service money, like the piles of money that could be made, the dump truck loads of money, that could be made, where he was just like, look, it's okay. We'll figure all this out later. We just got to get, you know what I mean? Because it's just interesting to me that the big thing here is Sony bought Bungie, and it seemed like they had so much excitement for them. Jim Ryan was hyped about it. Herman Hulst was hyped about it. And then in like less than 2 years or about 2 years, we find out that it's like disaster over there, where it's like, yeah, these guys are in like the Bungie situation is getting very close to being a dire situation. It's like, what happened? And it just seems clear to me that like somebody somewhere along the way at Sony did not realize like how poorly managed Bungie was, not just in terms of having trouble like listening to the fan base, but also financially. So I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on with Bungie, and I'll just take what Hiroki Totoki is telling me for face value. He's saying, hey, they're great creatives. They know what they're doing with live service, but they don't know what they're doing with money. We're going to fix that. I think it's so funny, man, that Hiroki Totoki is just like, he's going to clean shit up around PlayStation. He is. He's going to just go around and just work his CFO magic. Oh, I laugh now, but hopefully it'll be okay. Saying it's clear that Sony's not satisfied with Bungie. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, obviously he has to try to walk the line of being honest to the shareholders, but also trying to get in any positives, trying to like squeeze anything in there that could hopefully leave the shareholders not feeling too bad. And I think that's why it's funny where he's like, yeah, they're great creatives and they know what they're doing with live service, but it's like the reality is they don't know what they're doing with money. And again, this comes off of the reports that they were like missing their revenue targets by like 50% or 45%. So yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's so ironic to be hearing this about Bungie right now while seeing Arrowhead just clean house for Sony, and for PlayStation with Helldivers 2. Interesting. It's so interesting. They're great, but cut, cut, cut. Yeah, right. You're saying Bungie literally helped with Arrowhead's project. I did see people saying that. What, can you source that? Like, can you tell me where this was revealed? Because I've seen that brought up a couple times, but I've yet to see any write-ups on it or to find that, VGC 24/7. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Just give me a second. I'm trying to see if I can find this. Not seeing it. All right, let me see if I can just search Bungie helped Helldivers 2. Why am I not seeing anything pop up for this? Yeah, I'm looking it up. I'm not seeing anything. I'll have to. Yeah, you're saying it's fake. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anybody. Again, citing it. VGC said it wasn't true. My question is, why would Bungie help out at this point in time? Why would Bungie help out with anything when they can't even help themselves? Oh, you're saying like they've allocated the majority of their staff to work with to help with other live service games? I don't know about that either. We'll find out. Well, yeah, the situation with Bungie is still in motion. We'll find out. We'll find out. All right. We still do have a couple more topics here. So here's something I want to talk to you guys about. This is a discussion I definitely want to have because it's one that I've seen again, unfortunately, and I don't mean to. I don't want this conversation to be positioned, and to be honest, I don't want any of the conversations. I've been striving to ensure that none of the conversations we're having today are positioned as defensive ones, because in my opinion, there's just no need to be defensive about any of this. I think it's just a matter of talking about what is and then just speculating what could be. And one of the things I feel like needs a little bit of clarification, but it also gets me excited. And that's the thing. There's really no need for defense from anybody, in my opinion, because if anything, it's like people who are maybe feeling a little bit nervous or worried or concerned, they should realize this is actually a good thing. Like, this is good. What am I referring to? I'm talking about Sony acknowledging that the PS5 is entering the latter half of its life cycle. Now, I just want to say that this is something that has also led to immense fear-mongering and a lot of doom and glooming on the internet, unfortunately. And I think what made matters worse is there were some people actually misquoting it. I think IGN got caught misquoting it, where they said the PS5 is entering its latter stage, which led so many people to think that, like, oh my God, like, we're almost done. But in reality, what Sony said is the latter half. So let's think about it. Sony says we're entering the latter half of the console life cycle in 2024. The console came out in 2020. Well, that means we have at least 4 years of full support. However, it's safe to say that the PS5 will be supported for many years to come, probably well beyond 4, because Sony's not walking away from the PS5 anytime soon. You're saying, isn't that just semantics? No, that is not semantics. No, because you have to understand that the word half is incredibly important when talking about the life cycle of anything, to where saying latter stage, right? Stage, you replace the word half with stage, it like you don't know. Like, it doesn't, saying latter stage does not communicate to you that we're halfway through. That's the problem. And the reason why that's important is because, think about it. When Sony says we're halfway through the PS5's life cycle, what they're really telling you is we have 4 more years. That's nearly half a decade, dude. That's why it's so important to focus on it being latter half, because that's a long time. And here's why I think people should be excited about this. And it makes me so sad to see such fear-mongering surrounding PlayStation right now, and so much negativity, because people are just completely overlooking or forgetting something critical to the PlayStation life cycle. And that is that for the past 2 generations, and there's only been there's only been 4 total generations of PlayStation consoles. So for half of the existence of the PlayStation console, for the past 2 generations, the best of the best came during the second half, during the latter half. When people look back at the PS4 and when people look back at the PS3 with, just this fondness and like, man, what a generation that was, people are remembering most of the time the second half. Don't get me wrong. These games or these consoles, the PS3 and the PS4, had very good games in the first half as well. And so has the PS5. To me, that's the weird, like, again, I'm not trying to get defensive here. There's no reason to, but I wholeheartedly disagree with the notion and the insinuation or just the straight up saying that, man, the PS5 has had no games, or the PS5, the games that have released have been disappointing. To me, I'm sorry, like, to each their own, but I don't agree with that at all. I think it could be better, but it always could be better. But I think when you compare it to like some of the previous generations, and even if you compare it to some of the competition, some, not all, but some of the competition, even with current, previous generations, I think that's crazy that people come to that conclusion. But again, I'm not here to defend anything. What I will say is that people should try to remember what happened with the PS3, and especially with the PS4, dude. Think about it. The PS4 launched in 2013, and the final year of it, I mean, in terms of like, before the new console came out, was 2020. So that's a good chunk of time. That's 7 years. It's when you look at the PS4's life cycle from 2013 to 2020, I want you to think about which years Sony had produced the best results in terms of games, in terms of like just really kind of firing on all cylinders and delivering what people ultimately look back on as this is what defined that generation. Of course, in the earlier years, you got like infamous Second Son. Unfortunately, the Order 1886 didn't seem to do too well. Yeah, like Bloodborne, of course, absolutely. But really, it started in 2016. It started with not only their showcase, but with Uncharted 4. And then you go into 2017, you get games like Horizon, right? And I'm sure there's some games I'm forgetting from 2017, but then you think 2018, you get God of War, and then you get Spider-Man. 2019, Days Gone, Death Stranding. 2020, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us Part 2, Dreams. I mean, this is where I'm saying, like, we could just as easily look at the first 3 to 4 years of the PS5. Well, so far, like the first 3 years, really. Right? And it's like, we're kind of on the same trajectory to a degree. And I don't know, man. I know it's hard for people to view it that way. I understand. I understand why it's hard for people to view it that way, because they're like, well, that's great, MBG. You're right about that. The second half of the PS3 is when Sony really got it together and started delivering all these great games, and the PS4, they killed it. But right now, we're not seeing anything. Like right now, we don't know what to expect, except for Wolverine and Death Stranding 2. And those games are going to be awesome. But especially with Wolverine, like, we have no idea. Well, we kind of know when it's supposed to release, but technically we're not supposed to know when it's going to release. So it's like, I get it. I understand why it's easy for people right now to feel so doubtful, and especially people who just aren't fond of PlayStation, to kind of hop on the bandwagon of just fear mongering and downplaying. I get it, but I just think I'm not the only one that genuinely feels like the best years of this generation, like this is the beginning. Like we are entering the latter half. That's when the best, most memorable, most defining years are going to occur. And the only way I could see that being untrue, to be honest, the only way I could see that being untrue is if Sony truly did mess something up internally. And I mean mess it up to a degree in which it's like we've had such development problems and we screwed up so many of our teams with the live service pivot that we're going to just try to get out anything we can. But really, now we're looking at PlayStation 6 games. But I don't think that's the case. At least I hope that's not the case, right? But there's nothing there right now that gives me that feeling that we're going to find out. For example, like I saw a lot of people were saying, not a lot of people, but some people were thinking that Naughty Dog's next game is actually going to be a PS6 game. And I'm like, well, I like that. To me, that's so insane that it's like, there's no way. I refuse to believe that, because in order for that to be true, that this studio would have had to have been mismanaged to oblivion for that to be true. Where it's like a 7 to 8 year life cycle of a console, and this studio was mismanaged so bad they couldn't even put out one new game. I refuse to believe that. If we get to the year 2028 and the PlayStation 6 comes out and we still haven't had a new Naughty Dog game, then yeah, I will be like, wow, I can't, like, I would still be hard for me to believe. It's hard to even imagine, because it's like, how does that happen? I think they might be a little bit behind for sure, maybe a little bit behind schedule, but I don't know, that would be ridiculous, dude. Because that would mean that this entire time they weren't working on something else. Okay, so Capono, you're saying, bro, you ain't seeing Naughty Dog until PlayStation 6. Well, my question, in all seriousness to you, is like, what makes you feel so confident in that? Like, what makes you feel so confident that, yeah, we're not seeing them till next gen? I'm being serious. Like, I'm just wondering, like, what is the logic behind that? Because I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing it. Maybe I'm seeing it in a different way. Jakey Steer saying it's because the recent cancellation of Factions. They're making some Uncharted remakes. Dude, if Naughty Dog's next project is a remake, I will be checking out when it comes to Naughty Dog, bro. Like, if Naughty Dog's next announced game is a remake, I'm scratching them off the list, and I just no longer care. I'm gonna just be checking out. Like, it's insert. All right, I'm out. I'm a head out SpongeBob meme. Like, there's just no way. Yeah, that I agree with. You're saying a new game from Naughty Dog would take like 6 years or so. Well, here's my thing. The question is simply this. Was Naughty Dog and Sony dumb enough? You're saying, why, MBG? You love remakes, though. Well, listen, I like remakes, but there has to be a limit. And Naughty Dog has reached that limit, dude, where it's like remasters, remakes, enough. We need a new game. You can do remasters and remakes later on after you release that new game, but we need a new game. Period. We need a new game. But the question is, what was Sony dumb enough, was Naughty Dog dumb enough to say, okay, we're going to pursue this multiplayer game and we're not going to develop anything else alongside of it except for remakes and remasters? That does not compute in my brain. Like, that would be such piss poor management that whoever, like, Neil Druckmann would have to be fired, in my opinion. If that, or somebody would have to be, like, axed. Because if that's because it's the idea of, like, how could a studio with that pedigree put all of their eggs in that basket, not knowing if it's even going to work? That would be truly wild, man. And I will say this. If that is what ends up happening, if it turns out that we're going to see Naughty Dog's next game revealed, but it's like not coming out for, like, it's going to be a next gen game basically, I will feel so disappointed in Sony that was allowed to happen, that I will have no choice but to believe that this is why Jim Ryan retired and Connie Booth was fired. Because that truly is unacceptable, man. Where it's like, look, I'm okay if I got to wait till like 2027 or something, because it's like, fine, you guys need the time. It's a brand new game, hopefully. But, oh, man, that would be very, very, yeah, I wouldn't even, I'd have to take a little bit to process that one. Where's Blue Boxes Abandoned? Stop asking me about that. I don't know. Sounds like MBG is putting all of his eggs in one basket. Well, no, because I will say this. I want to make something clear too. I'm not saying that if Naughty Dog was mismanaged, then that means all of PlayStation Studios was mismanaged to the same degree. No, I do think this is a make or break year for a Sony showcase. It is, man. Like, look, PlayStation fans understand that it takes time to make these games, to make great games. PlayStation fans went through the PS4 generation and they went through the PS3 generation. Like, we know that these games take time. But the biggest difference between this generation so far, where we are right now, and the way that those past generations occurred, like I talked to you about the second half, the biggest difference is that Sony was willing to show us, like, hey, this stuff isn't coming like now, and maybe not even the next year or two, but we're working on it, and you can look forward to it. Please be excited. You know what I mean? Sony's not doing that anymore. They haven't done that. Like, dude, Sony didn't do that since 2021. Think about that. Sony hasn't done that since 2021. And even when they did that in 2021, the only games that they did it for were Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine. And so when I say that this is a make or break year for Sony in terms of a showcase, it is. I mean that. I do. If Sony doesn't bring their games this year, I don't care if it's in May, I don't care if it's in June, I don't even care if it's in September. It's fine. If I need to wait till September, then I'll wait till September, but you better bring the heat. Because I'm not having another shit year of announcements. I'm not. Like, because if that happens, Sony won't. How is Sony gonna make it, man? You know what I mean? Like, that's a serious question. Like, if Sony can't deliver an exciting showcase with games, you know, like, people are already being so doom and gloom and dire. They were doom and gloom and dire after last year's showcase. To me, it is like, okay, Sony, like, it's time to show. That's all. And I don't mean to sound so entitled. It's not. I don't even think it's entitlement. It's just I think there's logic there. It's the logic of it. You know what I mean? Where it's like, even I would be like, if Sony can't show new exciting games at their showcase this year, then even I'm going to question, what is the point here then? Like, what are you guys doing with the PS5? Like, this is unacceptable at this point, you know? But I'm rooted, like, to be honest, like, I am not feeling that that's going to be the result, because it's like, how could that be the result? I mean, maybe it could be. I always got to keep my mind open, excuse me, to like any possibility. But it's like, I have been paying attention to PlayStation's internal studios, following them very closely, and it seems pretty clear to me that, like, putting Naughty Dog aside, right? Like, 'cause who knows what's going on with Naughty Dog? We'll find out eventually, but there's still so many other things. So, and they don't all, to be clear, I want to make this clear too. They don't all have to be massive games, right? They don't all have, like, if we could get one new massive game shown off and then some other like mid-size games, like for example, the rumor claiming that there's going to be a new Astro game this year, like, that's great. Like, that would get me excited. Yeah, exactly. If they don't have new games to show, how are they going to market the Pro? Maybe, hey, maybe that's the play, dude. Another Astro game alongside the PS5 Pro to kind of mirror what we got at the launch of the PS5. Ghetto Guy, you're saying LMAO. I knew it would be a week or two before MBG wanted to see more games after the state of play we just got. Well, because Ghetto God, you have to understand, we're having a different conversation. The conversation we're having is not about games that we're playing now and that we're going to be playing in the next few months. We're having a conversation about Sony laying down the roadmap for the remainder of this generation. You know, like, we are entering the latter half. And to be fair, like, Death Stranding 2 and Fizzant, like, I already told you, man, that's awesome. Well, first off, I think Fizzant is a PlayStation 6 game. But Death Stranding 2, yes, it was amazing to finally see that again. It was amazing to see that again. But listen, that state of play was really good. And even for as good as that state of play was, I think you can all agree with me when I say, like, Sony's still holding something big, like, a lot. Like we barely have, they're barely scratching the surface. I'll be honest, man. It feels like, I'm not saying it's like Sony's hiding. It's not that they're hiding. It's just they're trying clearly to wait as long as they can. And I think that's smart, because it's like, time it right. Timing is everything. But when you see what Sony did at that state of play, like, okay, here's Stellar Blade. We didn't make that game. Here's Silent Hill 2 Remake. We didn't make that game. Here's Rise of the Ronin. We kind of helped make that game, but it's mostly Team Ninja. You know? Here's Dragon's Dogma. And it's like that. That's all great. Like, this is great. I love it. Here's Helldivers 2. There you go, right? There's Helldivers 2. And that's all great. And then they're like, oh, here's Death Stranding 2. Oh, we didn't make Death Stranding 2 either. That's Kojima's game. Here's Fizzant. We're going to help Kojima make this game for the PlayStation 6. Presumably. And you like, and it's like, that's all awesome stuff. Like, yes, this is amazing. Hell yeah, that's the best state of play I've ever seen. But there's still like that massive void where it's like, wait, hold on though, but where are your studios? You know what I mean? Like, that's all it comes down to, is it's just, no matter how exciting it is and how good it is, there's still the lingering void of, but where is PlayStation Studios? And I am convinced at this point, maybe Sony saw this coming, dude. I don't know. Maybe Sony saw this coming, where they're like, think about it. If they're having trouble with their finances right now, you know, they just did their earnings report and it's not ideal. Maybe them not rushing these announcements could be the very thing that turns it all around. You know, could be the very thing that they're like, you know what? It's a good thing we didn't put a fire under these studios the past 2 years and we just let them cook. And we gave them time, because now we need these announcements. it's interesting because I remember people telling me this past couple years. They're like, listen, MBG, you're not going to see Sony come out and make these big announcements when the PS5 is doing phenomenal. You're not. You're not going to see them when they're riding that wave drop all these announcements because there's no need to. It's when they hit that slowing down point where the wave is starting to come down. It's starting to come down finally. And they don't want it to flatline. So they don't want to, reach that point. Then they're going to come out and they're going to make all the big announcements. I'm like, you know what? If Sony's first stated play of the year is anything to go by, yeah, I think that might be true, man. We'll see though. We'll see. I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's hard not to when we're speculating like this. When I'm speculating like this, but we will see. I'm of the mindset that Sony is more likely to succeed in showing us a proper roadmap this year than fail. Because if Sony is telling us again this year that like we're still not ready, I would be pretty scared. I'd be like, yo, if you're not ready in 2024 to even just show these games, what is going on? We'll see though. Keep expectations in check and you won't be disappointed. Yeah, that's a tough one, man. I will say that's a tough one because it's like, I'll tell you this. If Sony announces a showcase in the next couple months, I will have a different feeling than I did last year. I will behave differently than I did last year, where I will be excited and say, yes, hell yeah, another showcase, let's go. But I will also immediately then say, okay, Sony, now you have to prove, you have to show me that you remember how to put on a good showcase. I'm not going to assume, I'll be honest, like I'm not going to assume that my expectations are going to be met. I'm not, because I did that last year, dude. And I really did learn last year. Like, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure many of you remember, I was 100% convinced, you could not convince me otherwise, that this was going to be anything but an incredible showcase. Like, I was talking about, yo, Sony's going to bring out the heavy hitters. Let's go. And I couldn't have been more wrong. And it was tough to accept that shit, man. I didn't see that coming at all. So with that in mind, it's not that I'm not going to be negative or not be excited. I'm just going to, I did dress up a snake, but MGS was there. Okay, that's all that matters. It was there. I'm just saying that, yes, and Sony did skip a showcase in 2022. I'm just going to go in saying this could go either way, guys. Let's see how it turns out. All right. It's time for Totokism to take hold. Dude, watch Hiroki Totoki be like, showcases, they're too expensive. Cut them. Yeah, I agree. You're saying that state of play gave us a good vibe. I think so. Yeah, that's why it's disappointing to see such doom and gloom right now and such negativity, because I feel like Sony really did get off to a good start, and I'm still feeling that vibe. But, the reality of the financial reports and Sony just being candid with their investors seems to be what is kind of dampening that right now. But if there's something that I have learned, even just this year so far, but certainly in years past is that these things fluctuate, man. They go up and they go down. They go up and they go down. Sometimes, you know, overnight, sometimes over the course of a couple weeks, sometimes over the course of a couple months, but that's just the nature of it, man. All right, so I have a couple of other topics here that I'm going to run by you guys. Do me a favor and hit that like button. We still have over 480 people here watching. I really appreciate that, guys. Hit that like button for me. We're sitting at 258. Let's see if we can get to 275, maybe even 300 likes. I'm going to let you guys know the games that are coming to PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium, as well as the classics for this month. So you're looking at Need for Speed Unbound, The Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition, Tales of Arise, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Lego Worlds, Lego Jurassic World, Rogue Book, Rogue Lords, and Tales of Zestiria. When it comes to the PlayStation Premium Classics, you're looking at Resistance Retribution, which is confirmed to have a Platinum Trophy, Jet Rider 2, Tales of Symphonia, and Tales of Vesperia. Now, in terms of games that are leaving PlayStation Plus Extra next month, Civilization 6, Chia, Ghostwire Tokyo, Neo, The World Ends With You, Haven, Code Vein, Outer Wilds. Those are all leaving on March 19th. I want to give you guys an update on Stellar Blade. This is being reported by WCCF Tech. It says Stellar Blade will feature 3 different display modes when it launches this April on PS5. Members of the development team confirmed. In an interview with German publication Play 3, as spotted by Genki on X, game director Kim Hyung-tae and technical director Lee Dong-ji confirmed the game will feature 3 different display modes. Performance mode seems to be the mode to play the game as the developers intended, as it was developed with 60 FPS in mind, as is usually the case for action games. Also featured will be a resolution mode with 4K resolution support and a balanced mode that attempts to strike a balance between the 2 modes. It hasn't been specified if balanced mode will support a 40 FPS or if it will support 40 FPS gameplay. And so I just wanted to run this by you, where it's kind of cool to see that we're getting a balanced mode with Stellar Blade. I feel like this is something we frankly haven't been seeing enough of. And if I had to guess, this is going to be like the 40 FPS mode. They didn't confirm that, but it sounds like that's exactly what it's going to be. And a lot of people really do enjoy the 40 FPS modes because it really is striking a good balance between, what you would traditionally get in the performance mode and the fidelity mode, kind of marrying those two together. So Stellar Blade, worth noting, it seems like it's off to a good start pre-order wise. A lot of people still very excited for it. So coming out in April, 3 different modes you can choose from. We also have I think I acknowledged this in my last stream, but I just want to bring this up again for anybody who missed it. But it also is important, I think, to bring up because of the conversation we're having about the latter half of the PS5 and how, we're trying to figure out like what announcements could we expect, what games could be coming out maybe in the next year or so. Well, Jordan Midler of VGC has stated that we will see a new Twisted Metal game soon. Somebody on Twitter basically posted an image of Twisted Metal, to which he replied, "You won't be waiting long for that." So, judging by his wording, it's interesting because, again, we heard Sony say that they don't have any major franchise tentpole titles or like sequels planned between now and March of next year. And that led people to think that there's going to be no AAA games, no exciting games from them whatsoever. However, we are seeing Jordan Midler say that we're not going to have to wait long for Twisted Metal. Now, he didn't clarify, as far as I'm aware, if he was talking about a reveal. I think the assumption is he's talking about a reveal, but we could also be looking at an actual release of late 2024 or early 2025 for a new Twisted Metal. It's also worth noting that this new Twisted Metal will be a live service game. I don't know if that gets people upset, but Irfan, you're saying MBG, Disney, and Sony reportedly have signed a major deal for Sony Pictures Home Entertainment to take over all of Disney's physical media production going forward. Wow. Irfan, I don't know. I don't have that up in front of me right now, but if that's true, that's actually amazing. That's awesome. Really awesome to see Sony back up physical media that way. It gives me a lot of hope, man. It does. Gives me a lot of hope seeing a company like Sony come out and be like, hey, we'll do this. It's from Discussing Film. Okay. Let me check real quick. Maybe that'll pop up for me so I can confirm this. Really quick, we have an update from the official Helldivers 2 Twitter account. They say, support incoming. We have issued a patch for PC and PS5 players to address quick play functionality, platform authentication, and background performance. Yeah, no, it's official. Disney has reportedly signed a deal with Sony to take over all of Disney's physical media production going forward. That's great. And I'm seeing here, Sony, Hiroki Totoki was referring to Bungie, not all PlayStation studios, in his quote from Financials. Okay, so there we go. Some nice little updates there. But yeah, just getting back to Twisted Metal real quick, I just wanted to point out that we could get this game, in the next year or so. We might not. It's going to be a live service, and I'm really interested to see how they handle it. Because I think Helldivers 2 has made some PlayStation fans feel better about Sony's live service push. But I think it's way too soon to tell. Like, we do have to see how a game like Twisted Metal, how it turns out. So, have one last report here for you. Some of the stuff we might cover in a video tomorrow, because again, I know not everybody watches the streams. But it says Square Enix's Naoki Hamaguchi has dropped a hint about the release date window for Final Fantasy VII Remake's Part 3. The third installment, which has yet to be titled, might be out by early 2028, as it seems to be following the same trajectory of FF7 Rebirth. In an interview with YouTuber Julian Shies, Hamaguchi was quizzed about FF7 Remake Part 3, to which he said that he's unable to divulge too much, but can say that the development team has made progress on the script. Of course, I cannot tell you what stage we are at, but we have already made progress on the script, and we are thinking about certain developments. Hamaguchi said around the 41-minute mark in the video. When we got to the end of development for Remake, we started talking about a sequel, and I think we can say that we are in the same situation today. So basically what people are doing is they're figuring, okay, they're saying they're in the same position now that they were after Remake launched. And so I guess the assumption is that, oh my God, dude, are you telling me that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 could be a launch PlayStation 6 title? Oh man. I'll tell you what, when you think about this stuff, I don't know how the latter half of the PS5 generation is going to be, but it feels like whatever may be lacking this generation for the PS5, Sony might make up for with the PlayStation 6. We'll see. It's way too early to tell, but there you go. That's the final report I have for you guys. And so, let me see. We're at a little over the 2.5 hour mark. So, what I want to do, I don't know how to say his last name. I'm not pronouncing it again, Gaming Survivor. You could help me out and tell me how to properly pronounce it. I'll just say Julian C. All right, so here's what we're going to do, guys. I do want to put together a members lounge. So I'm going to bring this stream to a close. I covered all the topics I wanted to discuss with you guys. But before I bring it to a close, I do want to just thank everybody. We're sitting at 17 members on the day, which is great to see. Thank you for all of your continued support. Thank you for all the super chats as well. I really do appreciate them. And I just want to ask you one more time before you head out and hopefully join me in the members lounge. Please hit that like button. We're sitting at 270 likes. We just need 30 more to get to 300. I'd really appreciate that. And also want to give a big shout out to Devil Shooter. Devil Shooter does a great job with the timestamps. If you see him in the comments, show him some love, give him some thanks. I know he really appreciates that. And so, yeah, if you are a channel member, in the next 5 or 10 minutes, probably 5 minutes, I'll have a members lounge going up for you, and we're going to hang out in there for a little while. So I hope to see you there. And so, yeah, to anybody who is not going to be joining me in the members lounge, I will catch you guys in the next proper stream, which will likely happen on Thursday. So, yeah, until the next time, guys, thank you and take